Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
I remember the launch of the original iMac. It was August 1998. I was a primary school student in year 6, around 10, turning 11, and it was the very first time I'd ever heard of Apple. I was instantly attracted to the range of colours, the sleek design. It actually took me not until years later to realise that it was an all-in-one design. And it was just far more attractive than anything else in terms of desktop computing. So do you remember this at all? It was quite a while ago.
No, I don't remember seeing it originally, exactly around launch time. The first time I actually paid attention to the iMac was around the launch of the iPod. I remember seeing the iPod on Oprah Winfrey's show. I was blown away by the ecosystem then, just as I am now.
Yeah, it was funny that it wasn't until years later that I was sort of reintroduced to Apple. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that they were a thing. And of course, iPod was just taking off. This is before iPhone had come out. And yeah, the reason that we point this out is because if you hadn't realized, it was the 20th anniversary for the iMac. Now, why this is so important, aside from being a milestone, is the fact that it essentially saved Apple. They were apparently 60 to 90 days away from bankruptcy. This was marked Steve Jobs' return to Apple, and it essentially, changed personal computing forever. So it was the first Johnny Ive designed product after he became Senior Vice President of Industrial Design. It introduced the I naming, which is just so popular now across several products. It was a major player in terms of bringing USB off the ground, and of course, we know how widely popular USB is. Funnily enough, at launch, their default browsers that came with it were Internet Explorer and Netscape, so Safari wasn't even a thing then. But for me, the reason I hold such a love for it is my first Apple product was my first Apple product was actually an iPod Shuffle, but my first Apple computer was an iMac in 2007. It was the first aluminium design, so they'd moved on from plastic then, and it was the second Intel-based model, so not PowerPC. Since then, I then upgraded in 2012 to this new slim design of iMac. Haven't upgraded since then, but I still use it every now and then, and I really love the design. It's quite a timeless design. So I know that you yourself don't currently own an iMac, but did you ever have one?
Yeah, I used to have an iMac. So essentially my first Apple computer was the white MacBook. And obviously in those days, they still had CD drives. And the CD drive became misaligned with the actual body of the MacBook. So I took it back to the store probably about 2 weeks before the warranty was up, and they had it for about a week and then said they couldn't repair it. So after they said they couldn't repair it, I asked them for the option to have the full retail price back and then put that towards another computer. This was a year later. And they said, okay, so I only had to pay in like $150 to upgrade to an iMac, which was the 2008 iMac. So I think it was when they first went widescreen on the iMac, because before it was like this 4:3 display, and this was the first 16:9 with Bluetooth keyboard and mouse. And it was a massive upgrade, and I ended up upgrading that machine to 12 gigs of RAM, and it was really good. So I enjoyed my iMac, and I would love to have a 5K iMac now, or the iMac Pro. They definitely still blow me away. It's definitely one of my favorite Apple computers.
Well, speaking of iMac Pro, so Tim, who I've mentioned in previous episodes, my friend Tim, his iMac Pro has arrived today. So awesome. I'll hopefully have some photos or videos or something to release soon. Funnily enough, tying in with this anniversary is that Spigen have actually released original iMac inspired iPhone cases, which while look relatively chunky, I actually like the level they went to bring in the exact type of frosted colors and everything. One funny thing that I always notice when people talk about iMac is the fact that so many Americans refer to the iconic blue as Bondi blue. I'm like, it's Bondi blue, it's Bondi Beach, it's Bondi blue, but.
Yeah,
anyway.
that really irritates me. I even, obviously, we both live in Australia, so we both know, but I even knew that before I moved here. So it just irks me that they say that, because like they're not even making an effort to try. It's just like, oh yeah, I have no idea where that came from, but I'm just going to call it whatever I like. So yes, every time I hear it, I, die inside.
While I doubt that they'd ever return to bringing multiple colours to an iMac, there is still something that's quite attractive about it, even though it does look very retro nowadays. I also remember that Apple were obviously far, far, far smaller back then, and this was year 9, 2001, I'd just seen Zoolander, and there was that scene where he throws the computer over the edge. He's like, I'll destroy the files. The files are in the computer. And he throws an iMac over the edge and it, explodes. And I remember my friend pointing out, being like, oh, they're so stupid. He just destroyed the monitor. I was like, no, it's the whole computer. And he just still, several years after the launch of the iMac in 98, did not believe that an all-in-one design was possible. So it kind of shows how ahead of their time that Apple were, really.
Yeah, well, two things. They do make an iMac in multiple colors, space gray and silver, and they have multiple colors across the whole lineup.
People would argue that gray is not a color, but...
Yeah. What? But that's, they may argue that grey is not a colour, but space grey has to be a colour.
Space grey comes in multiple shades.
We know very many. And then, that's one of the things that still impresses me to this day. If you look at iMac Pro, the fact that they've managed to get all of that horsepower into all-in-one display. I remember when I did upgrade to the iMac, I knew that it was all-in-one, but I was still in disbelief, so to the point where even when I set it up, I was like, surely like this thing is not just going to turn on. But yes, of course the magic was there, and it turned on and was a beautiful experience.
Well, there you go. Happy 20th anniversary to the iMac. And continuing on our talk of displays, a circular Apple Watch. Many people have requested the fact that they think that the current Apple Watch design does not look like a watch and it should be circular. I disagree with that, but there has been some patent action linked to this. So can you divulge some details for us?
Yeah, so Apple won a patent for a wristwatch with circular display. One of the interesting things is the patent mentions the limitations of a circular display area, which I think has been primary reason for the anti-circular display Apple Watch group, is that the text gets cut off and just a lot of the current user interface doesn't make sense on that. And then of course this is just a patent. Apple often files patents that don't result in anything. My famous example is the liquid metal that everyone thought, especially YouTube not demos, mockups that we discussed a few weeks ago, that every YouTube mockup had this liquid metal body and it just looked so amazing. So yes, they have patents for things they don't actually end up going with. Again, and there was another interesting tidbit here. The patent was actually filed 8 months after the original Apple Watch was launched. So the original patents for the rectangular display one, they had been filed well in advance of this one. So it indicates that some further work was done after they had already decided on the rectangular display. So there is potential that they further exploring it at the very least, but there is potential it could come out not necessarily replacing the current displays, but as like a bit of a side or another model add to the lineup. Which was likely just given as a project for the engineers. Yeah, I think given how long the watch has already been out and the current success, I don't think we'll see a circular display unless there's a real major need to shake up the lineup, which I just don't see at the moment. I think Apple Watch is, or Apple has been focusing on the right things with the Apple Watch, adding on functionality that makes it more and more important in people's lives. We've seen it save lives over and over again, but it also just has become such a useful tool that so many people are getting it and are using it that I just don't see them shaking up the user interface that significantly for no reason.
And plus, Apple have, dramatically redesigned products in the past, but I think something like the Apple Watch is now become such an iconic design. And while they have given the option for, the honeycomb grid versus like list view and stuff like that, and while there are plenty of apps and icons that contain, circular objects, obviously such as workout and that, I just think you're going to sacrifice too much by trying to adjust everything to a circular display. And then, well, if it's then released as an option or an alternative model, that then means they sort of have to work on two different versions of the OS. And yeah, I would much rather than put their efforts into making the current watch, say, a bit slimmer, or they might do some more improvements with having like an edge-to-edge screen and stuff like that. While the current display does have that illusion of edge-to-edge, I can imagine they can sort of expand a bit on that. Maybe reduce the size of the crown, but I'm happy with the design. A circular design would be interesting, but yeah, I think I've seen too many Android smartwatches and stuff, and just seeing the way, like the whole flat tire effect and the way that content gets cut off, that it's just really put me off the idea of it.
Yeah, I think those two specific things are my pain points too. I know, as we mentioned earlier, Apple has addressed that those things would need to be taken care of in their patent. So I think another thing on the Apple Watch changing so fundamentally is, and this is a bit of a scary thought, but it leads to the question about band compatibility. So we know that Apple has been has a history of dropping support for ports, and I'll just extend that the lug connector is basically another port for a physical hardware. So what do you think this means for their plans to keep or change the band connector?
Aside from the whole idea of a circular design, like, are you talking about changing the lug or connector shape, even if they keep a rectangular design?
Yeah, so I think if they had to change to a circular design, it would almost certainly need to change. Yes. But it leads to the question of if they were to stay with the rectangular, how long do you think we can expect to keep our current bands for?
Well, see, I don't know. I can only actually see the displays getting larger, physical size not really changing much. The actual lug shape is already quite slim anyway, and with so many band options as well, I just there's no the only reason that they would change the shape, I think, is if they. Okay, say like the smart connector with iPad Pro, right? If they had something along those lines where there was something that was passing technology through the actual watch itself into the band, that they would warrant having to change the shape of it. But I'm just, the current shape is not bulky at all. It is slim. It's easy to, change and swap bands out. There's no aspect of, data speed or transfer or anything like that, like you get with, USB. That really, the only reason I can see they would change the shape is if they involved some form of smart bands,
They've certainly indicated that it's future-proofed, given, as you say, its slim profile and their regularity of updates. I think that's a key differentiator here. You don't often change your USB thumb drive, but they actively sell, so many band combinations every single quarter or every single half year that it seems unlikely that they would change it up quickly. I wish, though, that they would give some sort of timeline, at least with a year sort of either way, just to say, okay, you can expect at least 5 years of compatibility, then I think I'm far more likely to buy bands now, even if I'm not likely to buy bands in the final year of promised support.
I'm just waiting for a lug 2 to lug 1 adapter.
Where your band has to sit outside of your watch with the connector. Oh my god, can you imagine how ugly that would be? Especially if it was too circular.
Well, exactly. There's already Apple Watch lug to standard watch band adapters, so yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason for it. I imagine it would annoy a lot of people, and yeah, I think we're going to see at least another 4 years of this shape.
Do you think lug 2 would come in the box because it would be such outrage?
It'd have to. Either that, or if they ever did it, I think they might offer it would be a pain in terms of the actual production line, but they may offer an option of the actual watch. It's like, okay, you can get this Series 6 watch and you order it with either original lug or new lug option for the shape. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope it never happens. So it'd have to be something would have to be really compelling for me to really embrace it. But there you go. Okay, Google I/O. We did mention in a recent episode that we do actually talk about non-Apple stuff as well, and Google being a primary rival that we actually discuss. And they recently held their I/O event. Of course, this is coming just a few weeks before WWDC. While we're not going to break down the entire event because this isn't a Google podcast per se, there are a few aspects I want to talk about, and a major one that everyone's talking about that I think we definitely need to address. But I want to cover quickly the latest upcoming Android release that they previewed, Android P, their idea of digital well-being, and then, of course, Google Duplex, which, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't heard about Google Duplex by now, I think it's worth checking out. So, just quickly, Android P, it seems to me that with the changes Apple brought to iOS for iPhone X, it's definitely rubbed off on what Android are doing with their release. And essentially, from an Apple perspective, I see Android P has brought a gesture-based user interface, and it's essentially kind of like a poor man's version of the iPhone X one. I'm not saying that just from being an Apple fan. It legitimately just does not seem as intuitive or easy to use. The icon designs themselves, particularly within their sort of control center, are definitely more iOS-like with the way that you toggle them on and off and they turn blue and all their grayscale. They've introduced a text magnifier, which we've had for ages. Now you can actually toggle the gesture UI on and off, because I know a lot of Android fans that are used to the software buttons are going to be annoyed by it. So that kind of begs the question that if they let you toggle it, are they really actually embracing it? Even little things like within the user interface, they've introduced rounded edges and kind of like these inset floating elements, which are also very iOS-like. And little things like they can show you can quick edit and mark up screenshots, which is, hey, we saw that last year. I know there are a lot of Android people out there that will say, Apple is so late to the party, they've copied this Android feature and this Android feature. Well, it works both ways. So did you manage to get a glimpse of Android P at all?
Yeah, I had a look at a high level. So just on I'll just touch on what you said about it being a poor man's version of the gesture based UI, and I think that's definitely one way of putting it. And I might just talk a little bit more about that, because the one thing, when I picked up the iPhone X for the first time and started playing around with the gestures, it tracks your thumb movement so closely. It's like literally the software is just an extension of your finger. I know I sound like Johnny Ive right now, but it's just
wrong accent.
You can a little bit, but you can just flick up and the whole user interface just disappears. Up and it becomes the home screen, or you can flick through apps and flick right and left, and it follows your thumb, and it can slap back to the previous app or whatever the case is, right? But it follows exactly where your thumb goes. with the Android P version, if you think about the app switcher, it sort of jumps from one to the next. So it waits until you've reached a threshold on your swipe and then like jumps to the next. So if you're actually not lifting your thumb, that sort of seems jittery. It's not fluid. It's like the refresh rate on the display is lower, even though it's not. It's just that it makes it more jumpy, and it's not a lack of engineering talent. It's probably like a design or patent decision that just is inferior, and that's just a fact of the matter. So yeah, stuff like quick editing, screenshots, cool. They can take that from iOS this year, and then we might regain group notifications, and who really cares who had those first, right? That kind of stuff is novel and nice to have, but when it comes to the actual look and feel on such a deep level, it's just so much. It's just so good on iOS. So I am so glad that I'm on that side of the coin there. And then the other area that they've copied deeply is Android P has proper support for or notches, or if you're looking at glass half full, for bunny ears. So it's kind of that's an interesting thing that at a operating system level they are embracing the notch, which is just really ironic. So yeah,
I'm so frustrated by all the Android notches appearing. It is just you know how they say imitation's a form of flattery? I don't think they're flattering at all. And what they're actually containing within that notch is far inferior compared to something like the True Depth camera system. So that's a whole other topic altogether. But yeah.
And it's also ironic because despite having notches, they have a massive bottom bezel that they might as well put the camera in anyway and call it a day. The thing with the iPhone 10 is that so basically Samsung and Apple have the monopoly or duopoly on OLED displays, and the OLED display can fold underneath. So because it can fold underneath, they can connect it actually doesn't need like a backlight. So sorry, it doesn't need a backlight, but the LCD phones do need a backlight, so that's why they have that little bezel at the bottom as like this backlight connector. Or that's at least what I've heard. I haven't triple checked that fact, but essentially because they're LCDs, they need that backlight that's connected at the bottom, and that's why you have this chin. So that's kind of it's just, if you have a chin, it's defeating the point to have a notch.
Exactly. Oh well. It's hilariously frustrating just seeing the amount of people that absolutely obliterated the notch and the idea of a notch, and oh my god, it's the ugliest thing, I can't believe they'd do this. Yeah, Apple's design has gone to crap. And then what do you see? iPhone 10 is highly successful, and then now it's Notch City. Anyway.
Yeah.
That is a big point.
One of the more novel things, I think, coming out of I/O was the digital well-being. So it's basically a set of features to try to reduce phone addiction. So I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I'm addicted to my phone. I feel like I'm okay with putting it down. There are a couple of things that I really enjoy doing on my phone, or I'll extend this to my iPad also. But I certainly don't need a break from games and social media to the point where I need to self-regulate. How about you?
I use little things like logging out of Facebook every time and stuff like that as a way to basically combat muscle memory. It is so easy to pick up the phone and just open up Facebook without even thinking about it, or to log out and then log straight back in and you actually had no intention of doing it. So little things like that I feel is like, it's almost like uncontrollable phone I wouldn't say it's addiction. It's just something that you do so often, you just find yourself doing it, right?
Yeah.
Aside from that, no, I don't think so. I use my phone for a lot of stuff, but I feel like that if I'm going out to lunch with someone or if I'm in a meeting or whatever, I will keep my phone in my pocket. I've got the watch has helped a lot with that. If a notification is that important, I can at a glance check it on the watch, or a call or something, I can address it then, right?
Yeah.
But I certainly don't feel like that I'm one of those people that is, where one person is talking to you and the other person is just like not even taking it in and staring at their phone. Like I'm not in that situation. That to me is phone addiction, or people consistently using their phone while driving. That to me is phone addiction. So yeah. I mean, Apple have rolled out things like the automatic do not disturb while driving and stuff like that. Awesome. That they've done that. I feel like that's more of a safety thing as well, but that's partially addresses with addiction. But overall, I wouldn't say I'm addicted. No.
Yeah, there is a lot of pressure on Apple from their investors to address phone addiction. And as you say, CarPlay, do not disturb while driving, and actually to an extent some CarPlay features do some stuff to address that. So, there's still a long way to go. And I think Google is leading the pack here, and that's fine. And hopefully Apple can catch up on that. I'm thinking more around children. So obviously not being the parent in this podcast, I don't often think from that point of view, but I certainly see that in the future there may be issues if phone addiction is not addressed among like younger generations, or at least not encouraged in a healthy way. So anyway, what this digital well-being allows user to do is set a daily usage limit with an app timer. And if you use the app beyond the time allocated timer, grays out the icon, and it will give you a notification. If you press on that icon, which you can't dismiss the notification or change the setting right there, you have to go back into settings and undo your specified time. So it's not, if there's an emergency, say for example, that can only be addressed by a Twitter DM, you are not stuck until the next day. There is some stuff you can do about that. It gives you an app usage dashboard, which is designed to shock you. And I kind of use the battery usage thing on iOS to indicate what apps I've been using mainly. And then there is a wind down with a grayscale display, which I don't really I would never see myself using any form of grayscale display for any reason.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure. Aside from trying to combat eye strain, because they're tying with wind down in terms of like a lead up to a nighttime routine, right?
Yeah.
I didn't really see, like, what are they trying to do? Make the display less engaging, or make it look a bit more boring as for you to not want to use your phone. Is that the sort of gist of it?
I guess that could be one of really only two options. The other one might literally be reducing blue light, which I know that they say that may affect some people's sleep. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly about that one. I don't see myself ever using that.
Would you expect some form of features or controls from Apple at WWDC in regards to phone addiction?
Yeah, I do think, especially the pressure coming from the shareholders and Apple's point of view, I think they see this as more of a parental control thing, at least to start, or at least in a marketing way to start. I know that they've also marketed the Apple Watch as being a secondary measure to reduce your phone usage, to sort of leave it in your pocket. So I'm not sure that they'll come out targeting this to the whole user base, but I don't see why they shouldn't. So just on the one thing you mentioned earlier, nothing grinds me more than when you are with people, close friends, and everyone's just on their phone. So one of the ideas I heard thrown around by a website that shall not be named on this podcast was the something like digital well-being, where if you're in a group of friends who won't let you use your phone, which is basically the digital version of leaving your phone in the basket when you enter the door, which I think I wish I was brave enough to do, but yeah, it's definitely would be useful for those digitally addicted people.
I know exactly which site you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know if how on board people would be with that, but it's an idea.
Yeah, well, they would be equally as on board with putting their phone in the basket. So I guess I think I see it as more quirky, but definitely something fun to discuss.
So speaking of things that are fun and quirky and possibly quite scary, Google Duplex. So this is the thing. This is the reason that we wanted to put this in the water cooler section. This is what everyone's been talking about. This is what so many people have been sharing, and they're like, wow, this is the future. This is amazing. Other people are throwing out terms like Skynet is around the corner. So essentially, Duplex is part of Google Assistant, and at I/O, they did a couple of demos where basically you ask Assistant to, say, book a haircut for you, and it will then, without you even hearing the call, actually phone up the place to get the haircut at and start a conversation with a real person on the other end. What they've done is try to include human-like aspects such as ums and ahs to add realism to the voice. There is no announcing from Google Assistant that it is a Google Assistant and all that sort of stuff. So straight off the bat, it definitely had a big wow factor in terms of the advancements of AI. I will give them that. The technology behind it is incredible, but there is so much more to be addressed with this. So, as I said, a couple of reasons why people are talking about it. A lot of people are like, wow, this is incredible. Siri is dead. There's definitely a lot of that stuff going on with people. I think a lot of people think that this is literally going to be released like right now. Like this is happening, and they're not realizing this is actually just a tech demo of something that I feel like is at least a couple of years away. A lot of people that do like to bash Siri essentially are pushing this sort of thing as like this is the final nail in Siri's coffin and that sort of stuff. People know our stances on Siri, especially Nick himself has sort of explained the details of what's actually happening with Siri behind the scenes, aside from what people take from tech articles. What was your actual reaction when you first saw this?
So my initial reaction, I think, was the same reaction as a lot of people. I was impressed. But that's just taking it at face value. Google said at the time saying this is near launch, coming out soon, whatever, within a year. And so technologically, undoubtedly, it is very powerful technology that is very impressive. But then you get to the really creepy side of it, which, as you mentioned earlier, is the ums and the ahs, the user privacy and all that sort of stuff. And they can say now that privacy was it was designed from the start to have privacy, but it did not identify itself to the salon and to the restaurant later, and so it becomes really quite weird. And I'm not sure. Like, yes, technologically excellent, but wow, it's like opening Pandora's box. It really is for me.
Yeah.
And I think that more and more companies and more big tech companies really need to start being careful about that. I don't think that building for building's sake is really a good idea. So, I don't know. I think they have a lot of work to do to make this something that can go beyond California or other certain US states. And I think they have a lot of work to do to make people comfortable with this. Not only people who are actually using it to book their appointments, but also to get buy-in from the people who are more likely to be called by Google, because it starts at restaurants and hairdressers, and then what if they lodging a claim for you, an insurance claim, but then also selling advertising for other insurers, because whatever the case is, right? So it could just, where does the line end? And I think with Google, they don't really know, so it's a bit scary. And then also, as you say, it's probably longer than a year. And I don't think there's a necessity to bash Siri because of it. I don't think this is something Apple would ever do. And it's probably something that Apple would be fine with some other company doing for you, like Google. It just seems like it does cross that user privacy threshold.
It does feel like very dangerous territory to me. It is, as we've both said, very impressive, but if not handled correctly, this could go so wrong. Like, I can imagine something like this if used in a negative way, if something like in terms of the fact that, okay, so the Google Assistant's making the call for you, you don't hear the call, and then something is organized for the user that they don't even know happened.
Yeah.
And then something goes drastically wrong. I think something like this could literally be the fall of Google. Like, if it goes terribly wrong, as a company as huge as Google, this could seriously screw them over.
Well, you know how Apple doesn't want to build a backdoor into iOS, not only because the keys could get broken, someone could break into a server, get the encryption keys and just exploit it, but they also don't want to do that because they don't want engineers to actually work on that problem and take that knowledge elsewhere, and actually have that. So what Google is basically allowed is a whole bunch of people to learn how to make these robocalls that are ultra realistic, and so this could get into the wrong hands in so many ways that are not even branded by Google. So it becomes, as you say, really dangerous territory. And I can just imagine, I could just imagine what the kind of stuff that someone who had this technology could do. They could train it on your wife's voice and actually make calls in desperation and prank you that way, or some really, really creepy and really bizarre or financially impactful scenarios, and I just really don't like it. And it's quite, I think one of the there are definitely some upsides to it if you want to talk to those.
The main part that other tech journalists have also addressed is the fact that this could very well help people that are unable or struggle to speak, people that find that they are hard to be understood because of, say, having a really thick accent or something like that. So from an accessibility angle, it's good. But that's kind of about it. Because to me, obviously, coming from Google, coming from Silicon Valley, is this just a way of, oh, hey, we could make this awesome tech to wow people and we have the means to do it, so here it is? Is this just, if this does become a fully public feature, is this just going to make people lazier? How does this impact us as a society where currently we don't speak to each other enough in person anyway? They did a whole part on digital well-being and not having phone addiction, whereas this is kind of like, well, okay, you're going to essentially use your phone to replace actually talking, so it sort of works against that. And then there's, in the actual calls themselves, there's endless variables. So if you were, say, booking the reservation, within the restaurant, whatever, there could be additional info they need, such as where do you want to be located, inside, outside, with your seating? Is there specific dietary requirements? In the presentation, they mentioned about, if your child is unwell or whatever. There's so much that needs to be known in a medical scenario. There's no way I would want a Google Assistant to be making a call that I don't hear to try and get my, make contact with a hospital or something to get my child there. It's,
yeah.
What actually happens in that scenario? Like, when it doesn't know what to answer, what actually happens there?
Well, they said it fails gracefully. That was their wording. Like, if it fails gracefully, okay, well, you have not told us at all what it actually does, and I think that's because they don't know exactly what it will do in every scenario when it doesn't understand. Obviously, medically, that is the big concern, and I think I would just like to reiterate, this is happening in the background without you hearing what is happening. It just says, okay, I'll do that for you, and then comes back with the results. So there's a lot of black box stuff that happens, which is not good. And then I think accessibility is an upside, but one of the things that I think I don't like the accent hard to understand thing. Maybe that's because I have an accent, but at the same time, I think it just doesn't teach society to be tolerable and to actually, I think there's a valuable lesson in actually dealing with someone with an accent without thinking that, oh, they're stupid. And I think, it doesn't help anyone to put that layer in between them in reality. So it's kind of, it's so impressive. It's just such a pity that I just don't like it on a fundamental level because I just see so much that could go wrong with it. And a lot of Google engineers leave and start up their own projects. And this could just be another one where it just falls into the wrong hands.
I think there is a reason why someone as influential as Elon Musk is warning the world of the potential of AI and not actually handling it correctly and the type of consequences that could follow. And a breakthrough technology such as this, like I feel like we're on the cusp of something either really great or, yeah. I personally hope they, for me, I'd rather they use this type of conversational technology as a way to improve you, say, speaking to Google Home or something like that.
Or maybe speaking directly with the doctor.
Yeah.
Yourself, yeah. It's just, I agree. There's so many other ways this conversational technology could have been used other than making phone calls on your behalf. At the same time, like, I see a lot of value in everyone having a digital assistant that is that capable. In that, how would you like to be like the CEO, have that level of personal assistant with you 24/7? Sure, really useful. But there are a lot of questions that need to be answered before making it public facing or even developing it.
Yeah, all our comments aren't from some angle of us being sour about it because we're Apple fans and because we like Siri. There's certainly a lot Apple can do in the Siri space to advance it. I'm sure they are working on a lot of stuff. Typically, Apple don't reveal something until it's ready. And so a lot of people see that as them copying the competition because the competition has come out earlier with something similar that's not as good. So, yeah, The thing I do like about this, I think it will help put, like, this type of competition will help kind of push Apple even further to what they want to bring out with Siri and stuff like that. But I am expecting good stuff this year. I'm not expecting Apple to ever roll out anything like this. I certainly think their stance on privacy and that goes against this type of technology. But yeah, it's cool they could do it. It is impressive. I'm not really sure I want to see it worldwide. I think if it ever did make it, it would have to be restricted to, say, types of calls. So if you request for it to call the restaurant or the haircut or whatever, stuff like that, it's probably fine. But it could probably reject making a call for you if you ask something that could be a bit too precarious. And I think that when it does make the call, it needs to announce that it is Google Assistant calling on behalf of whatever the user's name is.
Yeah. On a lighter note, you must have watched the introduction for the original iPhone, or at least snippets of it, with Steve Jobs introducing it. And I thought about this immediately when I watched this. When he phones Starbucks and he like orders like 2,000 lattes, or he says like, he does something like that. He calls it Starbucks from Maps and he's like, oh, I'd like, let's say 2,000 lattes. I just can imagine him, if this was an Apple demo, it wouldn't have been a recorded video that they then played back in a very controlled scenario. I could just imagine him being like, call Starbucks and order me 2,000 lattes, and then Siri doing it for him. I could imagine the Steve version of that, which makes me smile.
Yeah, exactly. That type of humor, and actually doing it live, because that's the other thing, is that the conversations they played were most likely the two best of, thousands of different attempts or something. So, yeah. Well, we're going to now move on to the rumor mill. And speaking of WWDC coming up with iOS 12, there is some new details coming out about potentially having Face ID for landscape, and some details about an iPhone 10 Plus and the sizing of it. So there's a report from Makatakara, which I feel like possibly between them and DigiTimes are like the next best after KGI in terms of rumor sources. But with iPhone 10 Plus, they're stating it's going to have 6.5-inch OLED screen. So physically, will be in size will be close to the 8 Plus, but of course the screen is larger with the same micro bezel as the current iPhone 10. None of this seems in any way shocking. It seems very much possible to me. Will be slightly thicker, about 0.2 mil thicker, so very small. Given that we both have iPhone 10s, would you actually want one that large?
When I first saw the 6 Plus, I thought there's no way I want one that large. And then I loved my 7 Plus, so I would probably try it for at least one cycle, but I'm really happy with my iPhone 10 at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly think just having a larger screen isn't going to make me want to upgrade. I really like the size of the current one, so yeah, there are definitely people that do appreciate the largest displays possible. Anything as close to phablet as possible. So
yeah,
especially when you
don't use an iPad.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Going along with this, as I mentioned, is the fact that iOS 12 is supposedly going to bring landscape orientation Face ID support, which I think it just recently, as I felt, has been definitely needed. So I actually ordered the Osmo 2 gimbal from DJI at work, and I've started playing around with it. It's really cool. I'm definitely going to review it in a future episode. But because I've set up the phone in landscape to shoot video in the gimbal, every time I want to, you got to set it up, and then I've got to unlock the phone. I have to turn my head to the side, and just to have landscape support there would be very handy. This also directly aligns with the idea of an iPad Pro, of course, because, I very much doubt they're going to want to pack 2 true depth camera systems for, the landscape orientation and portrait orientation. So something like this definitely aligns with the idea of an iPad Pro with Face ID. Given that they're talking about that it's for an iOS 12 release, this leads me to the idea of, could the iPad Pro be announced at WWDC but not available until September?
I find that highly unlikely. I don't think they need to do that just because of the horizontal Face ID. I think they could get away with explaining that, there are these situations with the current iPhone that would be really useful if you had horizontal Face ID without actually announcing the iPad. And I don't think that, unless there was some major change to the iPad, I don't think they would need to, they would lose out on a quarter of sales. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so.
So while I am very much fingers crossed, everything crossed, hoping for redesign, Face ID, iPad Pro, uniform, micro bezel, all that sort of stuff for WWDC, availability immediately, I'm ready to order. Do you actually think it's going to come, given the fact that we've seen very little about it?
No, I don't think so. I think we will be seeing that. If we see that this year, I think we'll be seeing it September.
I'm just quietly crying on the inside.
I did warn you early on. I said, I don't think it's coming that soon. Look, I would be delighted, and I'll probably be behind you in the queue, but I'm trying to not get my hopes up, and also being realistic in terms of what we've seen leak-wise. Usually by now, production will have started, and more of these rumors come about. Obviously, we haven't seen that many changes in the iPad body design, but I suspect that with the Face ID iPad, we would be seeing changes there, and so we'd probably be seeing sort of case specifications or shells, stuff like that usually starts at least appearing 2 to 3 months in advance. So you're hopeful? I'm hopeful, but I don't think so.
We were surprised, though, with the amount of hardware at last year's event. So I'm holding on to that fact. And I'm hoping that by their doubling down on secrecy that, I'm just going to brace myself for the fact that it may not appear, and I am happy to wait. I don't think I'm going to rush out and buy an iPad just to fill several months. Right, so that brings us to the end of episode 51 of Apple Slice. We are part of Ozcast Network. Typically, Nick likes to spell this out for people because there could be some discrepancy with how you enter the website, but I'm going to take this one on this time. So ozcastnetwork.com, AUSCAST network.com. They have 26 podcasts in total, plenty more in the pipeline, and it's just good to be part of something where we can we're not just sort of flying solo in the sense and the fact that we are contributing to Australian podcasting, so that's cool. And if people are enjoying Apple Size Podcasts but they aren't currently subscribed, where can they find us?
You can find us in Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Stitcher, Spotify, and so many others. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We have a group called Australian Apple Fans.
Yeah, if you just want to join a little bit of conversation between. And yeah, do you have anything else to add?
This week I do have something else to add, which is technology related but not Apple related. So last year, for my fiance's birthday, we got a drone, a DJI Spark, which we took with us on a recent trip to South Africa, and it actually flew away. We didn't have the remote. It disconnected from my phone. Lost GPS signal, and just floated away, which was no fun at all, and just into like beyond the mountains. So
wow.
that happened. And if you actually watch, I don't know if you've ever watched Mr. Mobile on YouTube, his DJI Spark review has exactly the same thing happen to him. So it was not just me, but it was not a fun moment.
Oh man, I feel sorry for you. Do people ever spend time out in the mountains? Do you think someone might stumble across it?
Maybe. I doubt if we'll ever find it, but yeah, it was not fun.
Between Apple Pencils in the Sydney Harbour and drones in the mountain.
Not had the best time of it. Yeah, but I guess in this case, at least I knew I was losing it when I was losing it. With the Apple Pencil, I had no idea, but the risks were obviously higher on this one. So,
what was your actual reaction? Like, what were you doing at the time when you saw it? Did it just fly up and take off?
Yeah, so I took off, and then it just like I was filming a video at the time, and then I was like going up, and then I actually intended to rotate the drone, and then I noticed it was drifting away, and then when I looked back down, it said disconnected, and it just carried on drifting and there was nothing I could do. It was just flying away.
So you can even run after it, or
no, because there's all like fencing and roads and other houses, so it couldn't really go anyway. So
wow.
Yeah.
At least you're not the only one that happened to, but oh man.
Yeah, you should definitely watch that video. Anyone listening should watch that video, because if you want to see what happened to me, except it was not a demo model that was sent to me by DJI, so I had more skin in the game than Mr. Mobile did.
Have you contacted them at all, or do you think it's any fault of?
No, I don't think that there's any sort of recourse on their side for that.
Wow. Well, there you go. That's it. That's a very shocking ending.
Yeah.
It's funny that, technology take off by itself. This is kind of aligns with the whole Google Duplex thing, but all right. Well, sorry to hear, but good discussion, and I will catch you in the next episode, which should be WWDC.
Cool. See ya.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.